Hello all, I hope you are doing well in these extraordinary times. I might start using the word unprecedented for some of these. Hope you're all well in these unprecedented times. Welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena where we're hosting you today. Today we're going to be talking about something that I get quite... I bank with a lot of people. I get quite excited about it. I love looking at the different apps, I love looking at the different updates, even the different cards. So today we are going to be looking at 11FS Pulse. And joining me today we have Clouston and Lindsey from 11FS. How are you doing today, guys? How are you doing, Clouston?
Yeah, good, thanks. Nice to be here.
Yeah, great to see you.
And Lindsey as well. And Lindsey, you've never actually met Clouston in the flesh before.
We have never met in the flesh because I started this job after lockdown began. So, in fact, out of everybody at the whole company, I've only met basically the two people who interviewed me, and that's it.
Amazing. I think we're going to start to see a lot of those stories.
Yeah.
There's a few people as well that you may also never meet because we can now work with people literally all over the world.
Yep.
Well, let's get right into it and let's look at Pulse. What was the genesis of Pulse? What was the aha moment? What was the moment where we thought, this is a product that the market really, really needs?
Yeah, so I think there was this pretty consistent feeling among the co-founders that computer analysis as part of any product design process yielded some pretty underwhelming results. So either it was hard to get good competitor content, as most financial products, as you'll know, had KYC requirements. Some even had credit checks. I talked to a bunch of users from a particular team of one of our kind of client brands whose credit scores were absolutely shot just because of the amount of products that they'd signed up for. They were working for a credit card company. It was in that space, which is pretty sad to hear, these kind of researchers giving away so much of their kind of personal details for what could be quite a small kind of computer analysis project. Then on top of that, researchers are often limited to only seeing or accessing products in the market where they're located as well. And as we know, there's a whole bunch of kind of innovations going on in specific markets around the world that other countries just can't get access to, which is a shame as well. But on top of that, you usually didn't get a good view of what the actual user was seeing. A lot of these researchers obviously open up these accounts and they're empty accounts. They're not populated. They don't show what a user's seen over the last, kind of couple of years of them being a customer of that product. So it was really these kind of empty accounts, these shell accounts that they were getting access to. And then lastly, I think there was this feeling that analysis was often delivered in these never-ending PDF formats as well, which can get quite kind of arduous to read through as well. So they started collecting recordings of real users interacting with actual FS products. They obviously redacted sensitive information from those products as well, just to obviously keep people's privacy in mind.
Boring.
Of course, yeah, totally. And then provided it alongside some analysis of things like usability, utility, visual design, and made it accessible to most of the world as well. So we have a bunch of users in different markets who are now able to see the innovations that are going on around the world from a real user's perspective as well, which is really cool, I think.
Excellent. And Lindsey, how did you get involved in this?
Yeah, so I guess to kind of obviously I wasn't there at the beginning, but when I arrived in April, and actually before that when I was interviewing, I knew immediately that I wanted to work on this thing, partly because having worked in product for most of the last decade, this was the product I'd always wished I'd had. So, when you're designing a product, whether you're in the early stages of competitor research or market research, or if you're going into the final stages of honing and fine-tuning a journey, the one thing you're always trying to do is to check out the competition and check out the state of the art. And it is, like Clouston says, incredibly arduous to collect all those journeys yourself, especially in financial services, because a lot of times to see behind the login screen, you have to start an account, and you can't start a trial account or a test account. You can't use a throwaway email. You have to do it for real. And that's just beyond most of us to do at scale. Even working in the biggest and the best equipped banks, it's really hard to get that kind of content together.
So, and I imagine as well. For example, looking at Revolut, you have various different. You have Revolut Metal, all different premium products. there's quite a lot to unpack there, and if you were doing that yourself personally, that also becomes quite expensive if you're doing that with everyone.
Yes.
You can have, if you had access to every premium product in the world.
Yeah.
And I think as well, investing in that and then getting to the point where you may not have found what you're looking for as well, I think would be especially disheartening. I think a lot of the time people are kind of putting up their own money for these things as well, or working on small projects that aren't well resourced, and I think it's especially a shame to know that they may be kind of investing their own time and money into finding something that they may not have been looking for.
Yeah, I bank with a fair few people.
Well.
Nice.
And this is more to kind of, see what the deal is with Monzo Plus or whatever it may be. I imagine my personal credit score is slightly shocked, but part of that is the fun element. I don't know if you saw the Built for Mars recent study, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm also there thinking in the back of my mind, Peter, you must have a lot of zombie accounts there. Your credit score must be quite interesting off the back of that.
Yeah.
What are some of the insights that can be gathered by having every possible customer journey that you can think of in such a comprehensive way? And there's things like, obviously, Built for Mars had the click-throughs, or time to reactivate an account or whatever. What are some of the other insights that have come out?
I think I'm most happy that we can provide an outcome where users can really accelerate their design process by understanding how a lot of companies are standardizing basic functionality. And that's not to say that they should just go and kind of rip off how other kind of companies are doing things, but there's kind of this level of basic functionality that it's kind of agreed that this is the best way to go about it. And having access to that means that you can focus on the things that do differentiate you in the market as well, and really allows you to focus your resources on developing that. So I think that's a big outcome that we can offer customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one thing to do what they did at Built for Mars, which is clearly a passion project. But it's another thing when it needs to be done, in order to drive a business decision or to get, your boss to buy into something or whatever, where to some extent, just having gone through it yourself might not be enough. You need to stack up all the like-for-like journeys next to each other to have all of that material together so that you can really drive those decisions in your teams, which hopefully that's something, that Pulse can add to, is kind of adding that layer of impartiality from out in the field. Absolutely.
Well, the thing that I always find interesting about banks now, particularly the neobanks, you get an update. In some cases, relatively extreme, Mondo to Monzo. In some cases, it's something you're not even aware is happening. How do you keep a track of all of these updates happening? But equally, how do you keep almost like an archive of all of the earlier versions? Because I imagine that may still also be useful for someone trying to sort of figure out how they're going to build up that user journey.
Have you been at our meetings? Because we talk about whether or not we should have a more of an archive view. That's one of these recurrent feature ideas that we've been playing with for the last couple of months. Yeah, it's a choice, right? And so we're right now working through some of those questions about content management. It's just how you trade off both the browsability and the discoverability of the library. We already have pushing 4,000 journeys in the library right now, which is a lot, and a lot to wade through and a lot to discover, against freshness. Should we have a more tightly curated library that only has the newest and the best journeys, or should we go for that full historical record? Those are exactly the questions that we're grappling with right now. So in terms of how we develop the product to discover all those things, that's something we're still working on. But in terms of, how we discover what's new and what's hot out there, it's like, we leverage a lot of what the rest of 11FS does in terms of, staying on top of the market and talking to our peers and our partner organizations. We obviously, watch all the app updates like everybody else. Most of us are avid customers of all of these services too. So kind of a mix of a bit of everything.
Clouston?
Yeah, I think there's a pretty rigorous process that's been instilled there. We've got a content team that obviously focus on the frequency that the stuff gets refreshed. So they themselves have got into a really good rhythm of understanding when's the best time to capture this content. Often there's changes to a product, but not kind of monumental enough to warrant going out and acquiring that content again. So I think there's a really nice schedule in place to make sure that happens depending on the type of company they're gathering content for. But like Lindsey said, we're really thinking about how we can be a little bit more proactive in getting that. And that may be, aligning to the actual release cycles of these products as well. Some of that information is publicly available, so watch this space. I think it's a pretty strong process right now, but like I said, I think we just need to, or can do a little bit better in lining it up with these actual releases.
Well, now benchmarking these thousands of journeys, that must have been a lot of fun, must be quite amazing. What are some of the common themes that come up time and time again, and what's the pitfall that every single company makes again and again and again?
So I think the thing that I often mark users or journeys down for is kind of providing a lack of context throughout the journey. I think you can especially see it in onboarding, which is obviously a big focus and a really popular kind of type of journey that users look at. And it's really about kind of communicating what's involved in this process, how long is it going to take, what do I need up front in order to get to the end of it, and making that really clear, not just at the start, but as you move through that process as well. So I think that's the common pitfall that I see. But then I think post-onboarding as well, it's just about providing visual context too. So I think a really good example is the way that companies like Monzo and Starling actually provide the brand logos next to a transaction in their transaction feed. And it just provides that visual context. It reduces kind of cognitive load on the user, and it means that they don't have to try and recall where that transaction was made, but instead they can recognize kind of visually where that transaction was made based on that brand logo as well. So context is a huge kind of theme for me, and we see it kind of lacking in a lot of journeys, but some journeys doing really well at providing it.
I don't know if I have a bigger one than the kind of classic onboarding journey example, but I think one of the things that does come up again and again in terms of pitfalls is, it might seem like a small one, is in the help and contact sections. Almost every help and contact journey that I've looked at has at some point, you can imagine if you were a user that you would reach kind of the end of the line and still be forced to pick up the phone. And that feels like, a kind of number one goal of any app is to avoid that moment. And I think in terms of the content and the copy management for those sections too, are just when a normal consumer is trying to get help with a banking function or application, repeating the information to them in a very banking-centric language is not necessarily an enlightening thing. And it's maybe not an everyone mistake, but it is much more common than you would think, even with some of the newer banks, where you kind of reach that end of the road with the help material very quickly. You can imagine the frustration that would result.
And it's definitely highlighting, Jason often talks about the difference between digital and digitized.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
You mentioned Starling there. I just have to bring up two things about Starling there. One, I don't know what happened, but I found it hilarious. For some reason, all of my transactions on my Starling business account came out as KFC. Much to the enjoyment, and I did not spend that amount of money at KFC.
Not for work, probably. Too.
Not for work. Not for work. But there were certain things like which I saw. For example, on Starling, I needed to download 3-month statements. I went to go to statements and said, hey, do you want to download 3 months or 6 months or 1 month? And I was like, well, it kind of recognized that this is one of the reasons when people go to download statements, they download, the last 3 months or whatever. Having that shown in the likes of a Starling, being able to do that, it must then be relatively straightforward because that's not technically that tricky. It's more of just the idea. It must be quite straightforward for a Barclays or a BBVA to go, this is really cool, we should do that as well. Yeah. Is that some of the ways that your customers tend to kind of use Pulse from idea to action?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's everything from understanding how brands are dealing with micro interactions, like way down at that kind of granular level, all the way up to by providing a particular journey, they can start to understand what different technology providers may have helped them in delivering that user experience. So we see everything from that kind of design level inspiration all the way up to how can I structure this journey from a third-party vendor point of view, and then obviously everything in between. So that's a really nice example in just understanding users and reflecting that with some really clever, smart defaults. And we see users going onto the platform just to find out those little things. I mean, we know at big banks, our users are working sometimes on such a small part of a journey that they can often obsess over and spend years just working on that small section of that product. So I think those micro interactions, those little journeys, I think are of massive interest to some of our users.
With so many banks, not just inside the UK, you obviously have the opportunity to explore things in the likes of China, Hong Kong, Australia, wherever it may be. What are some of the journeys that you've come up that you've never heard of the company before?
I saw a whole one of these about a month ago, Lunar out of Denmark, which I don't think there's any natural way I would ever have stumbled across it, like through the language barrier alone. But I looked at a couple of their journeys, and then I looked at the whole app, and basically everything they do is just beautifully designed. You know, like it has that, you know, that Scandinavian beautiful design, all of that kind of stuff at work. But also in between, you know, just having a clean and gorgeous design, they've put in some really great user benefits, some really neat kind of delight factor features. You know, in addition to a kind of save the change savings function, for example, you can turn that into a charity donation. You can share savings pots with other people. You can, you know, have all of those kind of standard features, but every one of them has a little bit of a value add, and it's all just really beautiful and delightful to use throughout. So my pick is definitely Lunar in Denmark.
Great shout.
Yeah, so mine would be Klarna, I think. Before they were kind of more of a household name, I guess, I was most impressed by the way that they had kind of slipped their product into the checkout experiences of brands that the customers were kind of already aware of and already trusted in order to get to that kind of checkout point as well. So they were really, really leveraging, I think, the brand recognition of the merchant that they were buying off, but basically slipping a pretty clever product into this checkout experience at the very end. And I think they just communicated the product really well, what's involved in it. Like I said, that context point is a really big one for me. And I know now that they're starting to attempt to own more of that end-to-end shopping experience. So I'd definitely say watch this space when it comes to Klarna as well.
Absolutely. Well, there was a period, it's still on at the moment. I know that Y Combinator are doing their pitch day virtually, I think, at the moment.
Yeah.
On a pitch, if you don't, you've got to say that you're the Amazon of banking, you're the Uber of banking. Possibly even the Spice Girls started this by saying they want to be the Daz soap of music. It's brand cross referencing. Do you bring in, and is there almost a demand or certainly an inspiration to having the payment journeys of an Uber, of a Grab, of a Didi? What's some of the kind of non-traditional retail banking elements that you think, actually that should be applied to banking?
Just generally to speak to that first point about bringing it into Pulse, I think what we're trying to do is provide inspiration for our users that may be outside of the immediate domain that they work in. We know, like for users that are working on onboarding, for example, we've used that example a lot, but they'll often look at kind of onboarding journeys from other verticals that are near to what they're kind of working on. I think that's really important, but I think we can expand that a little bit more to include things like Uber and Grab and even Airbnb and the way that they kind of communicate things to users as well. I think that we have to understand that the value of them or the pain of acquiring them may not be the same as other fintech journeys, and so the value of actually getting them may not be as high, but I think that's when we start to rely on our analysis of their usability, their utility, maybe the technology that lies underneath that journey as well that we might be able to offer. So I'll answer the easy part of that question. The harder one to Lindsey.
Oh, thanks.
This is all about the future of Pulse, because it could go many places.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I think we are at a point where, Pulse is now a few years old. We have a stable user base, and we're trying to figure out where it goes next. I think, like Clouston says, we're focused right now on developing all of those content themes. Our biggest thing right now is just to try to figure out how to identify the parts of the library and then the parts of the our user experience that people like the best and that they get the most out of. Because what we're really trying to do at the end of the day is we're not trying to get more videos watched or get more journeys watched, which is why we're resistant to the comparison to a large content platform that you may know of. But what we're really trying to do is help people solve problems. And what we want is for people to bring their design problems to Pulse, or their product problems to Pulse, see what their competitors doing, see where the tide is flowing in the whole industry, and use that to make what they're doing at home better, and then kind of magnified up several levels is actually to improve the industry as a whole. If that's not too big a goal. So yeah, I don't know what the best comparison is for us. I would say we're almost kind of like hopefully we'll become like a utility, that we're the thing that everybody relies on, the glue that holds all these companies together. So but yeah, I don't know if we're still trying to move away from being compared to certain large media platforms.
I'm assuming you mean the Ryan Reynolds ones, where it's just one movie streaming on repeat.
Just one at a time.
Cool. Well, guys, thank you very much for this. It sounds like, as a fintech geek, it sounds like a lot of fun to be able to go that and see all these various journeys from around the world, all these amazing apps. So congratulations, because it does seem like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Where is the best place to find out more about Pulse and to find out more about you guys? Clouston.
Yeah, so I think our landing page, pulse.11fs.com, is a really good place to get specifically information about Pulse, obviously. But with 11FS being such a content-driven company, I'm sure you can hear about it in one of the many podcasts that we release.
Do you guys do podcasts?
Just a couple, side thing.
And I know David and Sam Moll are hosting breakfast shows each morning as well on LinkedIn, which are great if you haven't caught them. And then, one of the other many media channels that we send stuff through as well.
Cool. All right. Well, Lindsey, Clouston, thank you so much. We'll catch up with you all very soon.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks a lot, Alan.